New York City shimmered under a sea of lights as night fell. On the 64th floor of the Graves Tower, Ethan Graves stood by the floor-to-ceiling window, his sharp gaze sweeping over the city below. Phone pressed to his ear, his voice carried the weight of power. $3 billion. If Kingston wants the Dubai property, that's my price. He ended the call without waiting for a response. This was how the world worked, his way or not at all. Behind him, his assistant, a woman with a composed demeanor, stepped into the room. "Mr. Graves, Mrs. Miranda called. She wants confirmation that you'll be attending the gala tonight." Ethan didn't turn. He merely adjusted the cuffs of his tailored shirt, his voice indifferent. "Tell her not to bother me with trivialities." At the far end of the lavish penthouse, Lena Whitmore, 25, carefully arranged white orchids in a crystal vase. As Ethan strode past, she glanced up instinctively, only to realize he didn't even see her. In Ethan's world, she was just part of the background, present but utterly insignificant. Lena moved quietly through the vast corridors of the penthouse, the cold marble floor chilling her bare feet. She had just finished arranging flowers in the main hall when she heard hushed voices coming from the study. The door wasn't fully closed. A small gap revealed Miranda Graves, the woman gracing the covers of high society magazines, standing by the desk. With her was a tall man with sharp, calculating eyes, Julian Voss, a businessman known as much for his power as for his scandals. Lena instinctively took a step back. She wasn't supposed to be here. But then Miranda's voice, cold and unwavering, made her freeze. "Ethan thinks he's in control. In a week he'll have nothing." "Are you certain?" Julian's voice was deep, cautious. Miranda let out a soft laugh, pulling a thick stack of documents from the safe. She slid them toward Julian, her fingers grazing the numbers printed on the page. "It's done. The offshore accounts are under our names. When the investigation hits, Ethan will take the fall alone, and by then, I will own everything." Lena's heart pounded. They were setting Ethan up. She stepped back carefully, trying to keep her breath steady, but the floor creaked softly beneath her weight. Miranda's gaze snapped toward the door. Lena held her breath. 1 second. 2. "Just the wind," Julian shrugged. Miranda hesitated, then returned to her scheme. Lena turned and hurried toward the staff quarters. She had to do something. Ethan needed to know the truth. Lena stood before Ethan's office door, her hands clenched tightly. She had no business being here. She was just a housekeeper, someone who had no right to interfere in her employer's life. But if she stayed silent, he would lose everything. She took a deep breath and knocked. "Come in." Ethan didn't look up as she entered. He was engrossed in reviewing a thick set of documents, his sharp eyes scanning the figures with practiced precision. "What are you doing here?" His voice was cold. Lena swallowed. "I need to speak with you. About Miranda." The mention of his wife made Ethan pause. He finally looked up, irritation flickering in his gray eyes. "What makes you think you have the right to say her name?" "I overheard her talking to Julian Voss." Lena rushed her words, fearing that hesitation would make her lose her nerve. "They're moving money out of the company. They're setting you up to take the fall." Silence filled the office. Then Ethan laughed. "That's ridiculous." He stood, slowly approaching her. "You expect me to believe a housekeeper over the woman who has stood by my side for 5 years? They're going to destroy you," Lena pleaded. "You need to investigate before it's too late." His smile faded. His gaze turned to ice. "I don't need someone like you telling me what to do." He pressed the security button on his desk. "You're fired, effective immediately." Lena opened her mouth to argue, but before she could, 2 security guards appeared, grabbing her by the arms and escorting her out. As the heavy doors slammed shut behind her, she realized she had failed. Ethan Graves had just rejected his only chance to save himself. 1 week after Ethan fired Lena, his world collapsed. Financial news headlines blared across every screen. Ethan Graves accused of financial fraud. Footage showed FBI agents raiding Graves Corporation's headquarters, carrying out boxes of documents. Ethan turned on the TV, his hands tightening into fists as he watched the live broadcast. his empire being torn apart before his eyes. His phone rang. It was his lawyer. "Ethan, we have a major problem. The SEC has launched an investigation, and all of your accounts have been frozen." Ethan stood motionless. "That's impossible. I didn't do anything." "Your signature is on the documents." His lawyer's voice was grim. "They have evidence, Ethan. And I'm afraid." The doorbell rang. Ethan stormed to the door and yanked it open. Miranda stood there, draped in an expensive fur coat, her eyes devoid of emotion. "You knew about this, didn't you?" he growled. Miranda smirked. "I have no idea what you're talking about." Then she stepped aside. Behind her stood Julian Voss, one hand casually in his pocket, his eyes glinting with victory. Ethan felt like he'd been punched in the gut. "You planned all of this?" Miranda tilted her head, a wicked smile playing on her lips. "Goodbye, Ethan. Best of luck." The door slammed shut. A week ago, Ethan Graves was untouchable, a man who controlled empires with a single call. Now he was nothing. As he stared at the eviction notice in his hand, the reality crushed him. The penthouse he built, the wealth he once wielded, all gone. And the worst part? He had no one to blame but himself. A month later, Ethan Graves had vanished from the financial world. Once a billionaire, he was now a man without a home. A few former associates had reached out, some out of pity, others out of curiosity. But Ethan had turned them all down. He wasn't a man who begged. If he was going to rise again, he would do it on his own terms. One winter night, Ethan wandered the streets of New York. The wind cut through his thin coat, snow blanketing the sidewalks. He couldn't remember his last meal. His stomach ached with hunger, his body weak from exhaustion. When he couldn't go any further, Ethan collapsed outside a small diner. The door swung open. A woman's voice rang out, warm, shocked. "Oh my God, Ethan?" Ethan blinked, trying to focus on the face before him. It was Lena Whitmore. She rushed forward and pulled him inside, wrapping a blanket around his shoulders. "Have you eaten anything?" she asked. He shook his head. Lena hesitated for a moment. Ethan Graves, her former boss, the man who once dismissed her like she was invisible, was now collapsed outside her diner, looking like a ghost of the man he used to be. Part of her wanted to walk away. But then she sighed, stepping inside. Minutes later, she returned with a bowl of steaming soup. She placed it in front of him, her voice laced with quiet understanding. "You finally see me now, don't you?" Ethan sat in silence at the small diner, his hands trembling as they gripped the warm bowl of soup. Lena had saved him. He looked up at her, suspicion flickering in his tired eyes. "Why are you helping me?" Lena folded her arms across her chest. "Because I'm not you." The answer struck him harder than he expected. He couldn't remember the last time someone helped him without expecting anything in return. After a moment, Lena exhaled. "I have something to show you." She pulled out her phone and opened a folder filled with dozens of audio files and images. Ethan leaned in. Financial records signed by Miranda, recordings of her conversations with Julian. Everything, all the evidence that could prove his innocence. His pulse pounded. "How did you get this?" "I started collecting it the day you fired me," Lena shrugged. "I knew they were setting you up, but you wouldn't listen." Ethan clenched his fists. He had lost everything because he refused to listen to the one person who had been honest with him. "What can we do with it?" His voice was low, controlled. Lena narrowed her eyes. "I know someone who can help." She pulled out her phone and dialed a number. After a few rings, a firm voice answered on the other end. "Valerie Torres, attorney, how can I help?" 2 days later, Ethan and Lena sat in a small law office in Brooklyn. Across from them was Valerie Torres, a sharp-eyed attorney with an air of quiet authority. She flipped through the documents Lena had provided, her brows furrowing as she listened to the recordings of Miranda and Julian's scheme. "This is enough to trigger an investigation," Valerie said, fixing Ethan with a pointed stare. "But we need something stronger. Physical evidence, undeniable proof." Lena hesitated. "Miranda kept a financial portfolio in her private suite. I once saw her reviewing it with Julian." Valerie nodded. If we can get our hands on that, it's game over for her. Ethan shook his head, concern darkening his features. But how do we get it? I can't go near the estate. There's still a restraining order. Lena met his gaze. I'll go. Ethan's response was immediate. No, it's too dangerous. Lena folded her arms. It's the only way. The next morning, Lena slipped into Miranda's mansion, the very house she had worked in for a year. She knew the staff's schedule, the blind spots in the security cameras, which doors were left unlocked. She made her way straight to Miranda's bedroom. The safe was inside the walk-in closet. Lena's heart pounded as she stared at the safe. The passcode she had glimpsed months ago might not even work. Taking a deep breath, she keyed in the numbers. Nothing. She bit her lip, thinking fast. Then she tried reversing the sequence. This time, the safe clicked open. Miranda was always meticulous, but she had a habit of repeating patterns. Inside was a thick portfolio stamped confidential. She grabbed it, slipped it into her bag, and walked out before anyone noticed. An hour later, she placed the folder on Valerie's desk. We have enough, Valerie said, a victorious smile curling on her lips. It's time for Miranda Graves to face justice. 3 weeks later, Ethan, Lena, and Valerie sat in the courtroom of Manhattan Federal Court. Reporters crowded outside, broadcasting updates on what was being called the biggest financial scandal of the year. Miranda Graves entered, draped in flawless Chanel, but tension was evident in her face. Julian Voss followed, flanked by a team of high-powered attorneys. The trial began. The prosecution laid out evidence of offshore accounts and fraudulent transfers, but the knockout punch came from Valerie. She stood, holding up the confidential financial portfolio Lena had retrieved. Mrs. Graves, is this your signature? Valerie asked, her voice cutting like steel. Miranda's face drained of color as she saw the documents, indisputable proof of the offshore accounts under her and Julian's names. I don't recognize this. Miranda tried to keep her composure. Really? Valerie raised a hand and pressed play. Miranda's voice rang through the courtroom speakers. Ethan will take the fall and our money will be safe. The courtroom erupted into chaos. Ethan turned to Lena, gratitude shining in his eyes. She had saved him. At that moment, Miranda suddenly bolted upright. I want immunity! I'll testify, she screamed, ready to betray Julian to save herself. But it was too late. The judge's gavel came down. Miranda and Julian were officially indicted. 3 months after the trial, Ethan sat in his new office, small, humble, but full of purpose. Graves Corporation was beyond saving, but he no longer cared about rebuilding an empire. He wanted to start over differently. With Lena and Valerie's help, he launched a nonprofit organization dedicated to helping victims of financial fraud, people like him who had lost everything due to corporate greed. On the opening day, Ethan watched Lena standing beside him, her smile warming something deep inside him. Why are you still here? He asked softly. Lena raised an eyebrow. I thought you knew by now. I believe in new beginnings. Ethan looked at her, realization settling in. He had lost everything, but in doing so he had found something far more valuable. At last he understood. Lena hadn't just saved him from ruin, she had shown him a new path, one more meaningful than any fortune. Ethan Graves never thought he'd be the kind of man who pursued a woman with everything he had. But for Lena Whitmore, he wanted to do it all. From the moment she helped him rise from his lowest point, something shifted inside him. Lena wasn't just the person who saved him. She was the one who made him want to be a better man. In the days that followed, Ethan started showing up at Lena's favorite cafe just to have coffee with her. He left handwritten notes on her desk at the nonprofit, with messages like, "Don't work too hard today. Did you know smiling more helps reduce stress?" Or sometimes something simpler but deeply sincere. "None of this would mean anything without you." Lena tried to act indifferent, but her heart always skipped a beat whenever Ethan was near. Then, one crisp autumn evening, Ethan sent her a text. "Take a walk with me? I have something to say." Brooklyn Bridge, 10 p.m. The wind swept gently over the East River, city lights shimmering on the water. Ethan turned to Lena. I lost everything once, but I don't regret it, because if it hadn't happened, I wouldn't have met you." Lena looked at him, her heartbeat quickening. Ethan took a deep breath, then softly took her hand in his. "Lena, I spent my life believing that power and wealth were the only things that mattered. I built walls around myself, never letting anyone in, and then I lost everything. But for the first time, I saw what truly mattered. It wasn't the money, the empire, or the power. It was you. You saw me when I was nothing. You believed in me when no one else did. I don't just love you, Lena. You're the only future I want." Lena smiled, her eyes reflecting the city's glow. "Ethan Graves, are you confessing your love to me on the Brooklyn Bridge?" Ethan chuckled. "I'd do anything to have you." Lena stared at him for a long moment, then slowly nodded. "I think I love you too." And under the New York night sky, they shared their first kiss, a beginning of a love that could never be broken. 2 years later, Ethan stood before a mirror in a luxurious New York hotel suite, adjusting his tie. Today was his wedding day. He still couldn't believe he had come this far, from a man who had lost everything, fallen to his lowest, to standing here, about to start a new life with the woman who had forever changed him. The door swung open. Valerie stepped in with a teasing smile. "Ready, groom?" Ethan smirked and nodded. At the church, Lena appeared in a stunning white gown, more beautiful than Ethan had ever seen her. As she walked down the aisle, their eyes met, filled with love, gratitude, and above all, an unshakable trust in their future. When the priest asked Ethan if he would take Lena as his wife, he gazed into her eyes and said, "Lena, I'm not marrying you because I owe you. I'm marrying you because when I was lost in the darkest part of my life, you didn't just save me, you believed in me. And that's something I never want to live without." Lena smiled, her eyes shimmering with joyful tears. "And I'm marrying you, Ethan, because you've shown me that even when everything falls apart, we can stand back up and rebuild together." They sealed their vows with a kiss as thunderous applause erupted around them. Outside the church, as Lena held onto Ethan's arm, snow gently began to fall, blanketing the city in soft white. A perfect beginning to their new life together. And this time Ethan knew with absolute certainty he would never be alone again.